I've been getting quite a few requests lately to do um, a list of my favorite movies of the last decade, meaning from the year 2000 to 2009 when everybody else made their lists. And I actually did make mine at the time, but I just never really got around to doing a video for it. But since I've been getting a couple questions about it recently, I thought, I might as well do it. I've got the time. So I'm going to do what I always do when I do my lists. It's just going to be five. And I may put some honorable mentions at the end, but I'm going to do it instead this time of doing it in alphabetical order. I'm going to actually have an order, and it's going to go be a countdown from five to one. And number five is going to be my least favorite, but it's going to count down to number one. But they're all really good movies, or at least I think they are. But yes, so let's start with number five as my fifth favorite movie of the decade. So my number five is Ang Lee's Brokeback Mountain, which came out in 2005. And if you haven't seen this, you've most certainly heard about it. It's been made fun of more than most dramatic films that I've seen in the last several years. And I've seen more fan trailers about this movie making fun of the whole gay aspect because, of course, the film is not about a man and a woman, a love story between a man and a woman, but a love story between two men. And I'm here to tell you, though, that despite all the humor and all that sort of stuff, this movie I really do believe is a masterpiece, and I think it is one of Ang Lee's greatest works. And for me, it's so personal in ways that you just wouldn't expect. It's personal and it's so heartbreaking, and it's a depiction of prejudice and people who can't get their way in a society that won't let them, and it's about oppression. And most people do consider this to be a typical love story, a story about star-crossed lovers, but it's much more than that, I really do believe. And I see it more as a glimpse into sort of the decline of American idealism. Because when you think about this movie, think about the style of it. It's a love story set in a Western type, like a Western style, almost like in a Western genre. And when I think of Westerns, when most people think of Westerns, they think masculinity, they think John Wayne, Roy Rogers, and they think about all of these kind of traditional American fables. It's kind of a symbol of what our nation stands for, right? But with Brokeback Mountain, it's almost like they're taking those typical genre stereotypes and completely inverting them in a way that makes the film so haunting. And it shows that our world is very different now. And the questions that the film is posing is so important to today, very modern, and things that people have been struggling with for years. It's just never really been talked about. But to put something like homosexuality at the center of a Western style film to me is just, it's very haunting and very painful to watch. And the movie, though, it's not overly emotional in any way. It's very beautiful. I mean, the cinematography is gorgeous. It really does take its time. Nothing at all is overdone. It just kind of, it's very human, I guess I could say. It allows the characters to kind of relate to one another, and it allows their stories to kind of unfold organically. And I think that for me, the two standouts in the film are definitely Michelle Williams. I love Michelle Williams. I think she's one of our best young actresses today. And then, of course, Heath Ledger. Heath Ledger in the film, to me, this is his best performance he ever gave. And I also think that it's one of the best performances of the decade, honestly. It's a very physical performance, but it's not so physical that it's melodramatic. It's not like he's being flamboyant just for the sake of being flamboyant. Actually, he's very internal. He doesn't say very much. And you can really see there's a major inner struggle, turmoil about him as a person, trying to figure out who he is in terms of his sexuality and that sort of thing. But it comes out very physically. I mean, it's a very clinched performance. He's pretty much almost taciturn. He never really says very much. And when he talks, it's kind of hard to understand him. But it's like almost as if everything he does is a struggle. Everything is a fight to get its way out. And I just think the way that his character grows throughout the course of the film is so remarkable. And I won't give away the ending, but the ending is one of the most beautiful, most sad moments. And the way that he plays it is just absolutely remarkable. And wow, it's just a really, really amazing movie. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend seeing it. I think, anyone who is just, I guess, who loves film, but also just loves great performances and loves films that are trying to say something poignant, this is definitely one of those. So my number four film is Catherine Bigelow's The Hurt Locker, and this was released in 2009. And this one is extremely intense in contrast with the very slow film Brokeback Mountain. This one is basically, when you're watching it, it's almost like you're just getting an adrenaline shot right into your heart. I mean, it really is immersive and gritty, realistic, and it's about war. And what's interesting about this film, though, is that it's, of course, about soldiers and that sort of thing, but it's it comes at things from a different perspective. It's coming not from a very patriotic standpoint, and it's not about propaganda at all. It's about human addiction to danger. And it's not about, I mean, valiance is important when you're talking about soldiers. And usually when I think like Saving Private Ryan, I think of, patriotism. I think of soldiers being really valiant. And that's prominent in this film, Bravery. But this movie is about addiction and obsession to danger and how human beings are reckless and they can't stay away the from danger when it comes to war, and we're obsessed with violence. And that is a very interesting angle. You just don't see that very often. And that's the opening quote in the film. Before the movie even starts, you see a quote that says, "War is a drug." And really, that puts it all there for you. That's pretty much what the film is about. People coping with real life and then being immersed in this really dangerous world and how they deal with it. And this idea is really seen through the character of Sergeant James, who is played by Jeremy Renner. And this, of course, is another great, great performance, one of my favorites of the decade as well. Jeremy Renner, when I saw him in this film, I thought this is a star immediately. I mean, you just see him in the movie. He's so charismatic, just magnetic. You can't take your eyes off of him. And the way that he's very, very bold, very, I guess, very masculine, and it's just really amazing to watch him because he's very reckless, but yet at the same time he has a lot of depth to him, and he's not a completely crazy off the wall sort of guy. I mean, there's things there that show that he's very caring, but he's just very. But the main thing I'm trying to get to is that he's fascinated with war and the consequences of it, and he really skirts the edge. He causes other people to get in danger, not just himself. And he plays a bomb diffuser. But a lot of the time, as I'm watching it, I think, what's more dangerous? Like, is he more dangerous, or is the bomb he's diffusing more dangerous? And that's very interesting, to think about your weapon and then the man trying to handle it. When you're worried about which one is more dangerous, that's kind of a problem. But it's something that is never really explored. And another thing that I think is really powerful in this movie is the aftermath, because you do get to see what it's like when you come home from war and you're with your family. A lot of soldiers don't know how to cope with that. They don't know how to go back and adjust to normal life. They can't socialize with their families and just can't operate in everyday life. And it's been a long time since I've seen a movie be able to handle that kind of juxtaposition so well. I mean, not since maybe The Deer Hunter have I seen something so powerful. And to me, that's the most powerful part of the entire film. But this movie, it's just, it plays everything out. It's purposely ambiguous. It doesn't want you to come away with any sort of propaganda. As I said, it wants you to decide things for yourself, decide what you think about war. And the movie is just very well crafted. It's very well crafted, and it's very intense, as I said, but the way that it's shot, it's very quick, very modern, but it's not chaotic. A lot of these movies you see, as I've said before, I know I talk about shaky cam and lost found footage, that sort of thing, really gets on my nerves because it's very visceral, but there's nothing beyond that. But with this movie, there's a real technique and rhythm to the way that these really kind of suspenseful scenes play out. It's almost kind of Hitchcockian, but in a modern sense. But yes, definitely see this movie if you have not yet. And on to number three. My number three film is David Lynch's Mulholland Drive, which came out in 2001. And when I say this movie is really interesting, I really do mean that this is a very interesting, very unusual film. And it's told in a completely jumbled, fragmented storyline. And basically, the premise is it's about Naomi Watts, who is a girl who wants to go to Hollywood to become a famous film actress, and she falls asleep. And the whole movie is a dream, and it basically, the entire film is a dream, and it starts out it's a conventional narrative, or it seems like a conventional narrative, but towards the end, once it hits a certain point, it completely becomes something else, and you don't really know what's real and what isn't. And that's what makes it very fascinating. If you're interested in dreams, you have to see this movie because you really get to see how the subconscious works, how certain symbols for certain things can be code for others, and how the identity of some people can get jumbled after a certain point, depending on how you view a certain person. So it's very confusing, but it's one of those things where as you're watching it, you can't take your eyes off of what's happening. When I first saw this movie, I thought I knew what was going on for a while, but by the end of the movie, you have no idea. And it's not until you see it at least 3 or 4 times that you really start to get a grasp on what the film is trying to say. And that's, as I said, completely okay. And it's just so extraordinarily well made and so mystifying and surreal in all the ways that David Lynch is known for being, that you have to watch it, especially if you're a fan of film and just a fan of the art of film, the craft. But I will say that the big criticism I've noticed just by seeing different critics and different reviews online, a lot of people think that the big criticism with this film is precisely what I've just been talking about, the technique. A lot of people think that it's all technique, it's all style, and nothing else, and that the fragmented quality of the movie is really just a gimmick. And I think that if that's the viewpoint you're coming from, you're missing the point completely, because once you watch the movie multiple times, you start to see that there really is a point to it. And David Lynch is definitely, it's a commentary basically on Hollywood. David Lynch is talking about the cruelty of Hollywood, how difficult the business is, and it's about just kind of masochism, voyeurism, and the way that you may love certain people or be friends with certain people, but they can stab you in the back because they want to climb their way to the top. They want certain roles. And most people don't realize what kind of side effect that can have on a person. And on Naomi Watts' character, she's this woman who really is an actress, but she gets basically backstabbed by someone that she really loves. And by the end of the movie, her life completely spirals out of control, or it does in her dream. And she goes into such a dark place, and people don't ever see that side of show business. It's all glamorized, and this shows you the nitty gritty, the stuff that you don't see. And the movie captures a feeling of just real pain and sorrow, but without outright saying we're commenting on Hollywood. You have to figure it out for yourself. And I like the fact that David Lynch really makes you work for it. And to me, that's what real art is when you get to discover things for yourself, and it's disguised well through the narrative. And few movies can really capture that, I think. And this movie just has a lot of depth, and those critics who think that it doesn't, I think just really need to watch it more and more, and you'll find so many more nuances that you didn't see before. But as I said, if you don't understand what's going on, watch it more times, because you will find it gets more and more interesting as it goes along. And there's a lot of very interesting websites that talk about hidden meanings and that sort of thing. So if you're really fascinated by dreams and are a fan of David Lynch, you have to watch this one.